We are on part 2 of the secret sauce to extraordinary sex and love.
I love it.
And relationships and dating. So we talked about the self. What is the self in part 1?
Right. So just a brief review. The self is, within the model of IFS.
Internal family systems.
Internal family systems. Right. So that's what is called in internal family systems. However, people call it their soul, their inner wisdom, their heart, their divinity, their higher self, their Buddha nature, you name it. That's what we're talking about. The essence of who a person is.
And who a person is, that self is really the leader of this. It's called internal family systems, is because we are an internal family of parts of us, which we're going to be discussing some parts.
Right.
The parts of us that sometimes can get into conflict with one another, that holds us back from having great career, great relationships, great dates, great sex, great love. So when you understand that the self needs to be the leader of this internal family of our parts, that's when you will recognize that this is the secret sauce to having everything that you want in your life. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into describing the interactions of self and parts.
Right, so very well said. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about what is self to self. So what happens when another person's self interacts, when one person's self interacts with another person's self. And we're going to discover why it's the secret sauce. So I love that you said secret sauce, because we're going to use a food analogy. This is our sunny side up egg analogy. And so you have one person meeting another person, and each of these people has a self. This is like the yolk, the core of that of these people. So this will be, self and self.
Possessing the 8 C's and the 5 P's, the qualities of curiosity, connectedness, compassion, confidence, courage, playfulness, presence, etc.
Yes. So that core authentic self is in there, and there are also parts in every person. And we will kind of describe, and some parts can be right here. So
why don't we just give an example right now of what a part was. When you and I met back at the beginning of March 2018 at Whole Foods, we recognized each other's faces, and then we were speaking. We were understanding each other's parts. We have our career parts.
So I we talked to where do I know you from? So there's a recognition, and I know you from IFS. Oh yeah, we're both into IFS. So we had these parts of us that were really vibing in that moment, and we talked about IFS, and we started to talk about other things too, like career and that sort of thing. And at a certain moment, when we were connecting, I started to recognize in Emily, wow, there's this place in her that really has a lot of compassion, a lot of warmth, a lot of insight, a lot of understanding. Like, I'm recognizing these qualities of self in her. The courage that she comes to life with, it is awesome to witness that. And I'm kind of noticing in that, and my parts are noticing it, and also myself is noticing it, and it's saying, oh, yeah, would like to be connected. I like that aspect of her. So, in the context of this friendship, and hopefully she starts to notice that in me as well.
Oh, Percy, you know that if we do get into conflict, we know how to get out of it.
Right, exactly.
Which is what we're going to teach you, of how to get out of conflict in the moment through understanding this language of parts and self.
Right. So there is this kind of yolk to yolk connection. You call it a heart to heart connection, and it doesn't have to be it can be in any kind of relationship. In this case, it's a friendship. This will be the bubble, kind of the skillet in which this takes place. So this is our friendship, and this is me. This is Emily. So at times, let's say you mentioned conflict. So let's say at times there might be a disagreement between this part and this part. Like I might say, okay, you know, I really don't like that idea, or I don't like the way that you said that, Emily, and I could say it like that, or this part can tell me that, and I could say, hey Emily, you know, a part of me really felt triggered by what you said.
Notice what he just said, a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying,
Right. Instead of saying I, because I'm really not speaking for I. Some of my parts might have been fine with what she said. But I'm actually being accurate in saying, yeah, a part of me felt really triggered by that. And notice how that is a little bit different than what this part might have said, which would be like, you know, you're wrong. I don't like what you said. What you said was dumb. And if I come at it like that, how's that going to affect you?
And you're using that you language instead of I, a part of me. So this is what happens in relationships all the time when people are fighting and in conflict. I told you to empty the dishwasher yesterday and it's still not empty. What's the matter with you? I told you to take the garbage out.
Right. So if the main relationship is self to self, the communication is going to happen through these core aspects of who we are. And we're going to be speaking on behalf of the parts. So a part of me really feels this way, and that might be received, as opposed to these parts, you know, calling each other names, or talking down to one another, or saying, you know, this is who you are, this is what you're doing, because that really ruptures the self to self and the connection overall. You know, you begin to just dissolve these connections, and the relationship goes away. However, if you can keep communication here between the self and the self, and have, you know, parts communicate as well, that's what we want to do. Now,
so this is like angry parts saying, hey, Percy, you got to share my emotions with Emily. Don't ignore me.
Right.
So you're speaking for your parts, not from your angry part.
Right. And you always do speak, because if this part is not heard in some way, if it's not expressed, it just stays here and gets, you know, walled up and gets bigger and bigger until it starts to obstruct the relationship. And then it can just come out. It's just going to come out and speak for, it's going to come out and maybe curse someone out, or throw a plate, or, you know, whatever might happen if an angry part isn't spoken for. So all these parts have to be paid attention to by the self and spoken for by the self. So, you know, another thing that we'll talk about in this series is, you know, how do you get a self-to-self connection? How does one get self-to-self in any sort of relationship? And, you know, so in some cases there might be parts that are really in the way, not allowing this to happen, and we want to talk about how to get those parts to step back.
Okay, that'll be the next video.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and we'll talk about what some of these main parts are that can get in the way of this self-to-self connection, or this healthy attachment between two people.
So the takeaway is essentially that each of us possesses a high self with the 8 C's and the 5 P's of self-leadership. That's the yoke, that's the core of who we are. But we also have all of these parts inside of us, feelings, thoughts, emotions, behaviors, that can overtake the self. And you become that angry, judgmental, critical person. And who wants to be friends with an angry, judgmental, critical person? You gotta ask those protectors to step aside and access that, and be really curious and compassionate and connected to the other person.
Right, being courageously vulnerable.
Being courageously vulnerable to speak for the parts that get triggered in certain situations. And we'll teach that in the part 3 of this video.
Excellent.
Okay.
Great. Looking
Till
forward to
next
seeing you
time.
next
Yep,
time.
bye.
Bye bye.